World War II left behind 6 mysteries that no archive, no record, and no expert can fully explain, and the truth behind them could rewrite how we remember the war entirely. Nazi officials watched the Amber Room vanish in the final days of Königsberg, a wonder lost without trace, just as Rudolf Hess risked his life on a solo flight to Scotland, setting off shockwaves through Hitler's inner circle and British intelligence alike. These are just 2 of the 6 baffling enigmas at the war's core, each with consequences that reverberate through history and every answer still contested. So how could the best documented conflict in human history still hide secrets this big? The search begins now. In the autumn of 1941, German troops pried the Amber Room from the Catherine Palace, packing its gilded panels and mosaics into 27 crates. The official records, detailed inventories, receipts, and museum correspondence tracked each shipment as it crossed the border into East Prussia. Within weeks, the Amber Room was reassembled and displayed in Königsberg Castle, its golden walls glowing under new lights, its fate seemingly secure. Local press reported on its arrival, and curator Alfred Rohde updated the inventories, confirming every crate and artifact in place. For nearly 3 years, the Amber Room remained in the castle's south wing, guarded by Nazi officials and monitored by the museum staff. Gauleiter Erich Koch, notorious for his ruthlessness, treated the treasure as a symbol of Reich prestige, issuing strict orders for its protection. Administrative dispatches from Berlin placed the Amber Room among the highest cultural priorities, and evacuation plans were drafted in case of Soviet advance. Yet, as 1944 wore on and Allied bombs began to fall, the certainty of those records began to fray. In August 1944, the RAF unleashed a devastating raid on Königsberg. Flames tore through the castle, shattering windows and collapsing floors. Rhodes' letters from the period claimed the Amber Room survived the bombing, hurriedly repacked and moved to the basement for safety. Fire service logs and revised inventories support this, at least in part. Damage was extensive, but no direct mention of the room's destruction appears in the immediate aftermath. The trail, so meticulously kept, grows faint. Orders from Berlin in January 1945 demanded the evacuation of art treasures westward, but no surviving manifest lists the Amber Room among the cargo. Koch and his staff fled as the Red Army closed in, leaving behind chaos and confusion. When Soviet search teams arrived in April 1945, they found only scorched ruins and a handful of stone mosaics, remnants, not the room itself. Eyewitnesses described a sticky, honey-colored residue where the panels once hung, but no crates, panels, or intact amber surfaces. Post-war investigations scoured cellars, bunkers, and even sunken ships, chasing rumors of secret transports and hidden caches. Some believe the Amber Room was destroyed in the fire, its treasures reduced to ash and memory. Others insist it was spirited away, lost in the fog of retreat, waiting in some forgotten bunker or forest vault. Despite decades of searching, through records, ruins, and rumor, the Amber Room's fate remains unproven. Its last confirmed location documented in late 1943, its final journey unrecorded, the silence in the archives is as telling as any evidence. The trail ends not with a discovery, but with a question that still haunts historians and treasure hunters alike. Rudolf Hess left Augsburg at 1745 on May 10, 1941, piloting a Messerschmitt Bf-110 across enemy territory. Luftwaffe records confirm the flight, and the British chain home radar at Otterkops Moss logged an unidentified aircraft at 22:08, tracking it as it crossed the North Sea toward Scotland. By nightfall, Hess parachuted into a field near Eaglesham, spraining his ankle on landing. The local home guard, startled by the sudden appearance of a German officer, took him into custody. He identified himself first as Alfred Horn, but his true identity quickly surfaced. The Duke of Hamilton, whose estate lay nearby, was summoned. In the early hours, Hess explained his mission, a peace proposal that, he claimed, would end the war between Britain and Germany. E5 interrogation records describe a man convinced that certain British leaders would listen. Yet, the British government dismissed his peace overture as delusional. Churchill called it the act of a deranged man, and official statements made clear that no negotiation would follow. In Berlin, the reaction was swift and severe. On May 11th, Hitler denounced Hess as insane, stripped him of all party and state positions, and ordered his name erased from official records. The Nazi leadership scrambled to control the narrative, casting Hess as a lone actor and forbidding any suggestion of internal dissent. Diaries from Joseph Goebbels and Albert Speer describe panic and confusion in the upper ranks, as rumors swirled about possible British contacts and secret factions within the Reich. British security files, including MI5's PREM 3/309, detail the interrogations and the government's efforts to keep sensitive details from public view. Portions of these records remain classified or heavily redacted, fueling speculation about what was discussed behind closed doors. The official line insists Hess acted alone, a desperate man chasing a private fantasy of peace. Yet the persistence of sealed files and missing transcripts has kept the debate alive. Historians agree on the facts of the flight and capture. What remains unsettled is the true motive. Was Hess a rogue idealist, or was he nudged by shadowy figures hoping for a back-channel deal? The evidence is incomplete. Some German and British documents are still withheld, and the full story may never surface. The enigma of Hess's Scotland gamble rests not in what is known, but in the silence and omissions that still shape the record. On January 17, 1945, Raoul Wallenberg vanished into Soviet custody, leaving behind a trail of diplomatic cables and unanswered questions. Official Soviet prison intake logs place Wallenberg and his driver at Moscow's Lubyanka just weeks later. His name appears in cell registers, first in Lubyanka, then in Lefortovo, tracked by the careful handwriting of prison clerks. For more than 2 years, the records confirm his presence: transfers, cell assignments, and the mundane details of daily confinement. Then, on March 1, 1947, Wallenberg's name is abruptly crossed out in the Lubyanka register. No explanation, no forwarding address. The silence begins. The only official Soviet statement arrived a decade later. In February 1957, Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko delivered a memorandum to the Swedish embassy. Wallenberg, it claimed, died of a heart attack in Lubyanka on July 17, 1947. His body, according to the note, was cremated without ceremony. No autopsy, no burial record, no witness list. The document stands alone, unsupported by internal death certificates or medical files. Swedish diplomats pressed for proof, but the archives offered only gaps: no corpse, no grave, only a single unsigned memo and the absence of a man. Swedish Foreign Ministry files, dense with cables and reports, chart the growing frustration. For years, Soviet officials insisted Wallenberg was unknown to them, even as their own records showed otherwise. After 1947, the Swedish government collected testimony from released prisoners and former guards, some describing encounters with a tall foreign inmate in Moscow or remote camps, others recalling a Swede who appeared in cell blocks years after the official death date. These accounts, logged in diplomatic dossiers and family petitions, stretch into the 1960s and 70s. Each is unconfirmed, each shadowed by the possibility of mistaken identity or rumor. The Russian-Swedish working group, examining the case decades later, found fragments of truth in both the Soviet records and the testimonies. The prison logs are real. The 1957 memo is real, but the absence of a death certificate, the missing remains, and the persistent eyewitness claims keep the door open. Wallenberg's fate is a story told in erasures and contradictions, in the stubborn opacity of archives and the enduring hope of those who searched for him. The final entry in the Soviet cell book is not a conclusion, but an invitation to doubt. At precisely 13:55 on December 15, 1944, a single-engine UC-64 Norseman lifted off from Twinwood Farm Airfield near Bedford. On board were Major Glenn Miller, the most famous bandleader of the era, his pilot John Morgan, and Lieutenant Colonel Norman Bessel. Their destination was Paris, a city just liberated and desperate for a morale boost. The weather, however, was anything but welcoming. U.S. Army Air Force's meteorological bulletins warned of thick fog, freezing temperatures, and the ever-present threat of carburetor icing, conditions that grounded many flights that day. Still, Miller's plane pressed on, charting a direct course over the English Channel. No distress call ever came. There were no sightings, no signals, and no trace of the Norseman after it crossed the coast. The official Army report, filed in the weeks that followed, cited hazardous weather and navigational error as the most probable causes. Other pilots recalled the day as one of the worst for icing, a silent killer that could choke an engine in minutes, especially in an aircraft with no de-icing equipment. Several other light planes were forced to turn back or ditch that afternoon, their crews barely escaping with their lives. Yet the absence of wreckage left a vacuum that speculation quickly filled. In the 1980s, former RAF navigator Fred Shaw claimed he witnessed a small plane spiraling into the channel after being struck by bombs jettisoned from returning Lancaster bombers. RAF logs confirm that several squadrons did release unused bombs over pre-designated drop zones in the channel that day. But the drop zones lay south of Miller's intended route, and no bomber crew reported seeing a Norseman or any other friendly aircraft below. Official flight plans and mission records place Miller's aircraft well outside the danger area at the relevant hour. No oil slick, debris, or human remains were ever recovered, despite extensive Allied search and rescue patrols in the days that followed. The bomb jettison theory persists in popular accounts, but the weight of evidence, weather advisories, flight logs, and survivor testimony, leans heavily toward a fatal encounter with ice. The Norseman, vulnerable and alone, likely lost power and vanished beneath the waves. Still, in the absence of wreckage, the story remains open to doubt. Miller's disappearance endures as a cautionary tale of wartime risk and the stubborn limits of archival certainty. Even the most famous names can simply vanish, leaving only questions in their wake. December 1944, over the Vosges Mountains, the pilots of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron reported something no manual had prepared them for. During a routine mission, their logbooks record a cluster of fiery orange lights, glowing, darting, sometimes pacing the aircraft, sometimes circling before vanishing into the night. These incidents, soon dubbed Foo Fighters, were not isolated. Over the following weeks, American and British crews flying night sorties from France to the Rhine filed after-action reports describing luminous spheres, red or white, sometimes moving in formation, sometimes splitting apart with impossible agility. The sightings came at a time when every shadow in the sky could mean death, and every unexplained flicker raised the question: was the enemy deploying a new weapon? Squadron intelligence officers pored over the reports, sketching diagrams and timelines. The 415th's technical staff, pressed for answers, considered every possibility: enemy rockets, advanced flares, even radar-guided decoys. Yet, when Allied G-2 intelligence reviewed the evidence, they found no trace of German technology that matched the descriptions. No fragments were ever recovered, no radar track confirmed the presence of solid objects, and German post-war records remained silent on any such device. The official conclusion, issued in early 1945, was blunt: no evidence of a secret enemy weapon. The explanation shifted toward the natural world. Meteorologists pointed to St. Elmo's fire, a plasma glow that can dance along aircraft wingtips in stormy weather. Others suggested ball lightning or reflections from ice crystals, rare but known to confuse even seasoned flyers. Some medical officers speculated about the effects of fatigue, stress, and sensory overload in the cockpit, how adrenaline and exhaustion might conjure patterns out of darkness and static. Yet not every report fit the mold. A handful of encounters described objects that maneuvered with intent, changing course or speed in ways that defied simple physics. These outliers lingered in the mission logs, unresolved. By the war's end, hundreds of pages of pilot testimony, technical notes, and intelligence summaries had accumulated, but the mystery stubbornly remained. The Foo Fighters became a shorthand for the limits of wartime observation, a reminder that even the most disciplined crews, armed with the best equipment, could be fooled by the sky itself. The records, now yellowed with age, capture not just the tension of combat, but the boundaries of what could be explained in the chaos of war. August 18, 1945. Taihoku Airfield, Formosa. Subhas Chandra Bose, the charismatic leader of the Indian National Army, boarded a Japanese military transport under the alias Ichiro Okawa. The war was ending, Japan was days from surrender, and Bose was desperate to avoid Allied capture. Within minutes of takeoff, the Mitsubishi bomber faltered, then crashed back onto the runway, bursting into flames. Japanese Army doctors rushed Bose to the Taihoku Army Hospital, where medical notes, later summarized for Indian investigators, recorded extensive burns and a rapid decline. By evening, Bose was declared dead. His body, according to Japanese accounts, was cremated 2 days later. Ashes, said to be his, were handed to INA representatives and eventually placed in Tokyo's Renkoji Temple. The official story rests on these hospital summaries, witness statements from Japanese officers, and Bose's aide, Habibur Rahman, and a chain of custody for the ashes. Yet, every crucial document, the original crash report, hospital ledger, and cremation permit, survives only as a transcript or secondary copy. No certified original has been produced for independent scrutiny. 3 Indian commissions examined the evidence over the decades. The Shah Nawaz Committee in 1956 and the Khosla Commission in 1970 both accepted the crash narrative, relying on interviews and the available transcripts. But the Mukherjee Commission, reporting in 2005 after global archival searches, found the gaps too large to ignore. Without primary documents or forensic confirmation, it refused to rule out survival, though it found no proof Bose lived on. Rumors of escape flourished in the vacuum left by missing paperwork. Alleged sightings surfaced from Manchuria to the Soviet Union. Some claimed Bose lived as a hermit monk, others that he was a Soviet captive. None of these stories produced verifiable evidence. No photograph, no confirmed letter, no credible witness outside hearsay. The ashes at Renkoji Temple remain untested. DNA analysis, though technically possible, has never been authorized by the Indian government, citing diplomatic and political sensitivities. Each new inquiry returns to the same crossroads: a body reduced to ashes, records lost or withheld, and a nation divided between mourning and hope. Most historians, weighing the hospital notes and consistent Japanese and Indian testimonies, accept the crash and death in Taipei as the likeliest account. Yet, the absence of original documents and the refusal to allow scientific testing preserve the mystery. For many, Bose's fate is not just a question of evidence, but a reflection of political memory, how a leader's death, unresolved, can become a vessel for longing, myth, and the unfinished business of history. The Amber Room's last official inventory lists 27 crates missing since 1944, and despite decades of international searches, not one has been recovered. Rudolf Hess's 1941 flight is documented in RAF radar logs and MI5 interrogations, yet his true motive remains hidden in sealed archives. Soviet prison records confirm Raoul Wallenberg's detention, but conflicting testimonies leave his fate unresolved. Glenn Miller's disappearance is logged down to his takeoff time, but neither wreckage nor conclusive cause has ever been found. Foo Fighter sightings appear in dozens of Allied squadron reports, but no scientific analysis has explained every case. 3 official inquiries into Subhas Chandra Bose's death cite the 1945 Taipei crash, yet the absence of DNA evidence fuels ongoing debate. Each of these 6 enigmas stands on a foundation of documented fact, yet all are shaped by what is missing, lost, or still classified. Even in the most recorded war in history, crucial questions endure. For more evidence-based history, subscribe for future investigations.